When your savings feels like pushing a boulder up the hill and you're looking over your shoulder because creditors have no chill and they're boastful on social. You're just looking for something real. Let's get some tangible results and maybe do it over a meal. This is the Brunch and Budget podcast with your hosts, Pamela Capalad, a certified financial planner and accredited financial counselor, founder of Brunch and Budget, Pockets Change, and Sea Change. She's here to take the bite out of your budget.
And your other host, Dialect, director of pedagogy at Pockets Change and co-founder of Sea Change. He's here to change the way we talk about finance.
Recorded live-ish from Greenhouse Studios deep in the heart of Planet Brooklyn. Two brunch, two budget us. Yeah, that was that. I don't know if that was as good as the other one. Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Brunch and Budget. We're here to talk to y'all. Today, since it's two brunch, two budgets, in the sequels, you got to learn how to save.
Yes, you got to learn how to save.
Because, you make all the money in the first one, and then you're like, what are we going to do with that? That's what ruins many sequels is that. Right? You're creatively out of stuff. You didn't save it up.
You didn't save it up.
You got to learn how to save. That's why oftentimes
you spent it all in the first one, and they were like, "Oh, a sequel," and you're like, "I wasn't ready for a sequel."
Y'all know this, musicians who are asked to put out a second album. The first album took you 20 years to make, and then they're like, "So in 8 months after the tour, you're going to drop a new one, and it's going to be just as deep." And talk, you're like, and that's why, a lot of them second albums, like half the songs are about
being on tour.
Yeah. You've written that song.
Don't let your savings be like a second album.
Yes, no sophomore.
Is that what the lesson
is? No saving sophomore slumps.
There you go.
Maybe that's the title of today.
Ooh, too many S's. I'm into it, though.
It's called alliteration, Pam.
I love alliteration. All right, we're talking about saving today, and we're talking about why it's so hard to do.
Yeah, it is. It is hard to save, right? This is the worst thing about saving is folks act like it's not hard to do.
Yeah,
right?
They're like, you just have to save your money.
It sounds easy, right? You have money, right? And then you continue to have money, and then you did it, right? You saved, right? That's what saving is.
You just keep it.
One of the things that's really hard about saving is it doesn't make any sense, right? You have this, it sounds like a thing but then you have to spend money because you live in society. So you're paying rent, you're buying food, you're buying other things, you get tricked into buying some other stuff. And then all the savings is gone.
All of a sudden, right?
You're budgeting not for savings. You budget to make sure that you don't run out of money before you're done buying the stuff that you want to buy. So even thinking about savings is wild. And if y'all have been listening to us for a while, and hey, welcome back for y'all who've been listening for a while, even if you're new, we love behavioral science stuff. It's very fulfilling and interesting and sometimes scary. And the illest thing we found, we probably actually talked about this on the show, and we will keep talking about it because, wow. The Common Sense Labs folks went and did a survey and found that there are 0 social cues associated with saving.
100% of our cues as social human beings
regarding the money.
Yeah, are around spending money.
People talk about saving lives, and that's a beautiful thing, saving relationships, saving time. But we don't actually give each other props for saving money. We give props for spending money. Hey, I bought this jacket. Look, isn't this a nice jacket? Yeah, it looks good. It looks good on you. Oh, look at you spending money on yourself and, self-care and taking But the only time we ever actually talk about saving money is when we say, hey, I saved $10 on this jacket. No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
You just told me you bought the jacket.
You spent less than you expected to spend, and that's not the same as saving. Saving, like most verbs, like loving, caring, this is an active term. You have to do it on purpose for it to work. Saving is not simply the act of not spending.
Well, and even thinking about saving and what comes to mind when you think about saving, the first thing that I know people think of, that I know I think of is, what do I have to stop spending money on? What do I have to give up? What do I have to restrict myself on, right? So even when you are trying to get into the mindset of getting ready to save, it's still in relation to spending. It's still in relation to not spending.
Well, I mean, and to be real, there is some of that, right? You are going to be thinking about your saving, your spending, but I think a lot of it has to do with order.
Yeah. And also the idea of not spending money is not exciting. It's not fun. You're denying yourself of things.
But that's because it sounds passive.
Yes.
We were talking before we started doing the show about the Little Dicky song, Save That Money, where he's joking about how badass and awesome and fun it is to save money. And it's this little ha-ha moment that actually feels kind of cringe to me because it's But we could feel those ways about this. The
Yeah.
same type of endorphins that we're getting from spending money on stuff, we can get from saving money. We've talked about this a few times before, but we kind of spend money only for two reasons, right? We either want the product or service, or we want to feel like we're in control and we're using the purchase as a proxy. And that's not just limited to your purchases. You can create those feelings by saving actively as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because the thing is that when you can apply those two principles for spending or those two reasons that people spend to your savings and say, hey, I am saving to feel in control. It's so hard. I shouldn't say it's so hard, but for a lot of people, I think myself included, it's hard for me to save for a thing. It's hard for me to say, oh, I'm saving towards this goal or I'm saving towards this thing or for this reason. But one thing that I realized is I'm someone who saves for a feeling. And so saving to feel in control is something that motivates me to save.
Yeah. And, it makes me think, I was looking over here at some of our notes talking about this study that folks had from the University of California and University of Toronto about people spending more and saving less because they only see what other people are spending. Again, when you're looking at Instagram, you don't see savings. You might see somebody stacking, right? They'll have like the money bands out and they're showing you that, but they're planning on doing something with it.
No one's thinking like, oh my God, look at that stack of money. I hope he puts it into a savings account.
Yo, I actually,
that would be cool, though.
Actually, no, I would, if you have that, if you like just really want to get like a stack just to feel what it feels like in cash, please put the caption below about the high yield saving account that you're about to put it in and how excited you are about that.
I love it. We got to do that.
We're already going to the solutions.
So good. So there is a term for this. It's called visibility bias, right? And so the reason why it's so difficult when all the social cues that you see are for spending money is we're social creatures. So what we see other people doing, we feel like we should be able to do. We're going to want to do it ourselves. And so the idea of saving money, because it's so invisible, is not something that we're rewarded for socially either.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of like fitness, right? You don't see a lot of the work going into it. You see the end result. And you assume that it's a lot harder than it really is. And I think that's one of the things about your billionaires, when like how rich people have become celebrities, even without having any other type of tangible skills, just for being rich. And people start attributing stuff to them, being like, well, you must be really smart. You must be really disciplined. You must know all these things that we don't because you've amassed all of this money. And we assume it's because you didn't spend it.
Right. Exactly. So we actually have a special guest, Diedrich Asante Muhammad, who from NCRC.
I mean, he's a special guest, but I don't know if he's a special guest because we have him on a lot. Like it's not
he's a special guest.
He's a special human being and wonderful cat and really talented and smart.
And we love having him on the show. If you've been listening to us for a while, you know that he brings all of the stats and all of the facts. And one of the things that he really breaks down for us is breaking down the myth that Black people save less than white people, right? And that's why there's a racial wealth divide. That's a huge myth that goes around, is the racial wealth divide exists because Black people just aren't as good at saving money. And one of the stats that we found is that dollar for dollar, Black families actually save 1.3 times more than white families.
A third more.
Yeah.
It's, some of folks could say that it has something to do with us being told so much that we don't save. But actually, I feel like, and this is not something that I reference for, but I feel like it started before that. It started with people not having much. One of the things that I've found anecdotally as an educator, as a community member, and also in a number of studies is that people who don't have a lot of money are mad good at budgeting their money.
Yes,
because
they
have limited amounts.
Yeah.
It's a thing that starts from need. And I think that a lot of the noise that happens, the latte factor stuff, it makes it so we second guess ourselves because we're actually more generous and more introspective than we give ourselves credit for. And once we start second guessing ourselves, that's when we get got.
Yeah. So let's take a listen to Diedrich and then go into a song.
Just like a lion gotta watch his daddy die to be king, and Babe Ruth and bored couples gotta swing, you gotta preach to the choir so they know what to sing. This is Preach to the Choir with Diedrich Asante Muhammad, the Chief of Membership Policy and Equity at NCRC. Yo, Diedrich, what's the word?
You got his title right.
We are starting strong 2022 with babies watching their fathers die and swinging. Yeah.
Well, come on. Come on, someone had pointed out to me that, like, I just can't wait to be king is like, homeboy knew that his dad had to die to be king, so that just can't wait to be king. There's like, were you and Scar working together? What's up?
Had to be.
It's much more Game of Thrones-ish, than we thought.
Yes.
I want to see that reboot of The Lion King, please.
Yes, less Macbeth, more Red Wedding.
Did y'all see y'all see? I just saw the preview for the reboot of The Fresh Prince.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
We're so
That's
ready
really
for
interesting.
That.
I mean, I'm really concerned about how it looks like it's going to be pretty conservative. And it's like, young man, we're giving you the opportunity, pull yourself out of your ghetto ways, and now you will be successful like us.
This hurts me to say because a lot of my family was in West Philly. I was born in Center City, but not born in West Philly, like a lot of my family. So I consider myself kind of a West Philly kid. I rap, I did some acting. I felt very connected to this show when it came out. And only as an adult do I realize how pull up your pants, bootstrap, and respectability politics that show was.
Well, I don't think I realized it until 2 hours ago when I saw the preview of the reboot, because it was so comedy and so kind of crazy. Like, I don't know, I didn't focus on the political aspect. With this one, they're trying to make it more like intense, dramatic. I was like, oh, the politics are a lot clearer here. This isn't just funny Will Smith and Carlton, and everybody else being hysterical. So I don't really put that together with the first show, though it was there. But I think this show is going to make it even more dramatic.
This brings us to what we're talking about. So Uncle Phil, we loved our Uncle Phil, right?
Did.
But Uncle Phil would tell Will, the reason why your mama and them is poor out in Philly is not because I got this cushy judge job. It's not that at all. It's because I worked harder for what I did.
That's right. That's the line, right? The big stat is that white families have 10 times the wealth of the average Black family in the United States, and it would take an average of 242 years for the average Black family to catch up to the wealth of a white family today. And that is if a white family's wealth just stopped growing today.
Well, right? I want you to remember that James Avery, love to James Avery, wonderful actor, not only played Uncle Phil, but he also played the Shredder in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. So blaming youth of color for why the city is disenfranchised has kind of been his typecasting.
Totally. Different species,
I had no idea. That he played both roles. They were from the streets. They were in the sewers and they breakdanced, right? So, I don't know what else.
It's amazing and not amazing how many ostensibly cute and harmless types of media were projecting this idea that it was a personal responsibility issue.
Absolutely. And the reason why I think personal responsibility, even artistically, is so ingrained just in America in general, is this like hyper individualism that we're in, and this idea of working hard and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is such a quintessential part of like America, right? And so when people hear these racial wealth divide stats, I've literally read comment after comment of people trying to explain this stat away and saying, well, Black and Latinx families just don't know how to save. They spend more money than they make. They spend all that money on sneakers, right?
Ooh. They live beyond their means. Yeah. That's the favorite one to say.
That's the phrase. So, is that why there's a racial wealth divide, Diedrich? Is that why?
I like the repetition of the question to add drama to that. No. It's interesting. I wrote a piece in 2020 called "The Racial Wealth Divide: Personal Finance and African Americans," and trying to help break this down in a longer kind of written form. And I think the whole idea of if you work hard, you will make it is meant to justify the system, right? That the system works, just individuals aren't working. And so all failure is individual failure, right? Versus having an understanding, I have, in this piece, the whole trying to deconstruct the whole notion that private wealth isn't created just by private action. Actually, large parts of it is created by public policy, right? And so that is, I think a challenge to this notion that, that individuals are to blame or to be praised as was gotten to earlier for their, economic well-being, right? Like it's not a coincidence that in a country founded on white supremacy that created mass enslavement of Black people, genocide against indigenous people, that a few hundred years later, you still have Blacks and Latinos who are economically disenfranchised, and that the whites who garnered the land, who garnered resources from the slave labor are still doing that much better, right? So, I do believe I'm in this racial wealth divide space to do public policy. I do believe it's interesting to look at what type of personal finance, which you can do to better your economic condition. But the idea that you live beyond your means, well, yeah, if you're making $10 an hour and you have a child, yeah, because you can't live on the salary they're giving to you. So of course, like you're structured to live, to not have the means to meet your lifestyle. And again, that is where this idea of public policy is supposed to help create, this idea of healthcare, of free education, all of these different things that are supposed to then allow you to be able to, move forward in life, because no one is able to provide everything they need for their household by themselves. It is communal, it is policy, it is governmental.
Today's episode is sponsored by us, PocketChange. At PocketChange, we offer in-person and virtual workshops for students from grade school to grad school, professional development for educators and administrators, and jams for the whole family to learn, unlearn, and unpack. We use hip-hop pedagogy in the classroom to meet students where they're at, and hip-hop performance in the communities to dispel myths and create new common sense around money. For some free resources, go to pocketchange.com/toolkit and sign up for our newsletter. Let's change the way we talk about finance. Well, that whole live beyond your means thing, it sounds like a choice.
Yeah.
And I think even as I'm saying it in my head, it's like, well, you live beyond your means because you choose to live beyond your means. The very simple model that we're shown as kids, if we get any financial literacy, is you can buy this one piece of food that is lesser amount, but will fill your stomach and may not be as fancy, or the other one, which is nebulously fancy.
No, that's
nothing about the nutrition or you needing it because of your allergies or anything like that. So, without context, you can frame it that way.
Right, exactly. Well, and I think, too, that the other big argument that we hear all the time is just this idea of like they're spending money on frivolous things, right? Like even beyond food is they're spending money on things that they shouldn't have. They're only spending money. They're not spending money on just their needs. They're spending money on their wants. And that's why they can't save.
Well, and just like hard work at an office is not the same thing as hard work on the friolator. What do those terms even mean when it comes to being frivolous?
And the idea of saving corresponds very much with not, just your personal kind of will or what have you, but with how much money you make, right? Like when you make more money, you're able to save, you're able to put aside more for investments. It's very hard for anyone who has very little income and no wealth to begin with to save. And again, just one more thing on living beyond your means. Like we all live beyond our means, right? Like I couldn't afford to pay to have a road paved for me, right? To get to work, right? Like I can't afford to hire people to be waiting around that if my house catches on fire, I can call them for assistance, right? That's why we have infrastructure as weak as it is in this country. But, there's an understanding that individuals can't survive on our own. We need investments. And you see that in the United States, we do this weird thing where we put the least public resources and investment with those who have the least individual resources. So we double up on their asset poverty and make it more challenging, right? Now, there is this place for savings, right? But even if you're making a little bit of money, all you can really save for is maybe, hopefully you could afford to pay for a tire that's flat, or maybe you can, pay for a water bill or a heating bill that was a lot higher this month because of because of winter was unusually bad, right? Like you're not saving a lot if you're making little in income and you have low wealth, low assets.
But, the practical realities mean a lot. When the Shredder News Network is complaining that these turtles live in the sewer, so what are they doing buying authentic Japanese katana blades? I mean, they don't understand that that's important for their work. Oh, what are you doing buying pizza all the time? That's not affordable or sustainable. They live in the sewer. They don't have no refrigerators. Oh, why aren't you saving your money in a bank? They are literal amphibians with no forms of identification.
No social security number.
How would they even get, if any money they get is in cash anyhow? Come on now. How do you expect them,
Wow.
I'm just saying in all parts of this, the context matters.
That's real. Well, I have a question for you. I might have a stat that throws a wrench in this. So there was a study by Go Banking Rates that found that 35% of people whose incomes were less than $25,000 had less than $1,000 in savings, which is very much in line with what you're saying, right, Diedrich? But not surprisingly, 23% of people who earn $150,000 or more also had less than $1,000 saved.
Well, you got to pay a lot of bills when you have your own technodrome and you're paying payroll for the foot soldiers to go and terrorize the
Teenage
city.
Ninja Turtles. I can tell throughout this thing, the Teenage Ninja Turtles is going to be a theme throughout. But actually, that's a point I was just about to get to, is that most of personal finance is really created in mind of higher income people, not even middle income people, but higher income people. And it is true that among higher income people or households, that is where personal finance and savings is most important, right? Because you have the most opportunity to actually set aside not just a little bit of money, but a decent enough amount of money that those savings could be used to get some real returns over time. So again, I think we're using weaknesses of the elite and then trying to place that on the poor to explain their situation versus, yes, do I think, high income people, particularly high income people that own their homes and what have you, could maybe spend better or save better? Sure. But that's not the problem of, 80% of America, right, who are lower and moderate income Americans. So I think that is a big problem, is we're taking these problems of the elite and we're trying to act like that's the problem of low and moderate income people.
Yeah, that's wild. That brings up so much stuff about the idea of risk. I think of a lot of folks. I think of myself when I was not making a lot of money and didn't have anything behind me. When I did get big windfalls, or when I did get a big number, a paycheck, more paychecks, things like that, I was thinking about what risks I could take to level up to the next place rather than what long-term strategies.
That's interesting. Just this idea of like, well, this money's going to be gone anyway, this big windfall. So let me figure out how I can make the most of it now. And that usually means spending it and not saving it, right?
Especially as a freelancer. I mean, my income, I was saying like more paychecks because my income was always inconsistent. So I didn't know if this was going to be a sustainable thing. So if I could use this to trick my way up into the next bracket, and then I won't have to do that as much, and then I can think about long-term savings.
Well, and I don't think that's completely illogical, right? I mean, and like as you were getting at, that if you you're going to be getting a check of $300,000 every year, and you think you're going to be getting that for the foreseeable future, you can strategically save and make some long-term investments. But if you're just getting, hey, it was a good month, like you are kind of thinking, all right, what's the best way to utilize this? And it's not, you're not thinking a 10-year plan. You're thinking, all right, what's the most immediate way I can leverage to get a little bit more money so I can kind of, keep things moving forward. So there is some logic to that, and there's, and again, I think that's why a lot of the financial planning is trying to get people who might have very irregular income versus low to moderate income, irregular income, to financially plan as if there is kind of consistent, strong income where you really can know, I'm going to put this amount of money in a 401k or invest in individual stocks or what have you. And then in 10, 20 years, I'll be doing really well, when like your financial life doesn't operate along these type of long-term plans.
Another thing that I see come up a lot with my clients, and particularly if I compare two clients where we have a white client who's making $100,000 and a black client who's making $100,000 is that my black client will most likely have student loan debt. They will most likely be sending money home to their family. They will most likely have all of these additional financial obligations, and they don't have the safety net or support or financial support necessarily from the generation behind them, from their parents or other family members. So even when, families of color cross the $100,000 mark in income, it still feels that much harder to save.
It feels, and it is, right? Like, I mean, again, that's why the racial wealth divide is so important, right? Is that if you're first generation, second generation, making six figures, and you had to pay more for college, then, you have more debt. So even when you're making that six figures, you got to pay more for that. Your mortgage, you didn't have much money to put down, on your mortgage. You took an FHA loan, right? So it's only 3% down, and you're paying that extra payment. What's that called? Private mortgage insurance, right? Yeah. So you have more on your mortgage to pay down, and that's not even including maybe some family or personal family responsibilities where your aunt, who's been having a hard time paying rent, maybe you're slipping her a little bit of money. So that income, it doesn't have the same effect as it does on a household whose family and community is more economically insecure. Because that's another interesting thing, is that even high income African Americans are live in areas with usually higher levels of poverty than middle income whites do, because we just, even as we're doing well, we can't afford the same type of neighborhoods that are as elite and keep out as much lower income people. I don't think that's good to keep out lower income people, but just highlighting that you're connected to a community much more in need. So, absolutely, that income alone doesn't do it. And that's why, again, that's the reality of the racial wealth divide. And that's why we need personal finance that really deals not just with individual issues of income and wealth, but communal and institutional. And then what can you do in your personal finance to best make a pathway possible for you?
It's just like how they say hurt people, communities in need help communities in need. How could Splinter move out of the sewer when he had to send money back to Japan for his daughter?
Right. Splinter was Japanese. Oh my God, you really watched the Ninja Turtles.
I'll be interested to know how many people listening have no idea who these people are. Like, Splinter being the rat sensei.
Well, they're multi-generational.
They are.
Come
There's
on
like
now.
literally like 4 or 5 different versions of them at this point, right?
They got one out right now. They just did the movie a couple years ago with Megan Fox.
Oh my god! I don't think
it was a couple years ago. I think we're aging ourselves. I think that was a while ago.
Oh wow! Was that mad long ago?
Yeah, back when Megan Fox was like
yeah. You said Megan Fox. I was like, I don't think that was last year. I don't think that was COVID time.
So we did talk about a lot of depressing stuff. I feel like if I was listening to this for the first time, I'd be like, okay, well, I give up. I'm just not going to save.
Well, yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah, so no one's saying not save. It's still important to save, right? It's still important to save for everyone. But we started off the conversation not, is it important to save? We started off the conversation talking about, isn't the problem with the racial wealth divide that people just don't save, right? And so those are different things. Like, you can be dealing with deep economic inequality. No, we need change in federal policy. No, you need a raise. That still doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to set aside something, right? Even trying to set aside something, because, we all have, different issues that come up where we even, I think we talked about this a little off mic before. There is something about getting into the practice of saving, right? So even if you're saving $5 a month, you're saving $5 a month. Once you do that, you realize you can do that. Then you're like, oh, well, I can save another $5 a month, right? Then it's $10 a month, right? And going up, or, for those who are making more, maybe it's $100 or $200 a month. And, that quickly gets to $2,400 that you have in savings. That's been really hard for you to build up. So I do think it is important at every level to figure out what your savings can be. Just don't beat yourself up that is, that your ability to do so or your challenges in doing so is the reason for your economic situation, but it can help your economic situation to save something.
Well, about feelings, right? I want to share a thing that, it may be inspiring and then maybe depressing again. So there's a stat we forget, but I forget where it comes from, but we've shared this before, that Black Americans save more money than white Americans.
Oh, yes. There was a Duke University
That's what it was.
paper on the 10 myths around the racial wealth divide. And the stat was that dollar for dollar earned, Black families actually save more money than white families per dollar earned.
So, hey, Black folks out there, maybe we're not living above our means as much as we think we are. The thing that might be a little sad again, and I'm just asking this because I really don't know, is how much of that is due to us always harping on our families, to the Uncle Phils out there, to bring it back around, telling us, well, you're living beyond your means. Black folk live beyond your means. You got to make sure that you don't. You got to make sure that you don't. How much of that is why we're doing it? And how much of that is just this practice that we've been having?
Because when you do look at the stats, that's actually a false narrative.
Right.
It's just completely made up.
No,
but is it built by the worry, right? Are white families saving less because they're less terrified about their families going without?
Yes. No. I think those are good points that, Black people are much more likely to be unemployed. They're more likely to be unemployed for longer periods of time. All of these types of things, make savings much more essential than if you have low levels of unemployment, shorter periods of unemployment. You don't need that. And again, this idea of the sins of the elite are put upon the poor. The idea of spending, not so much spending beyond your means, but spending on a lot of consumer items, unnecessary items. That is what high income people do, right? That's what markets are built upon, right? And then taking that could be beneficial for high income people and placing that as blame on lower moderate income people, again, I think is misplaced.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, that brings us. I just kind of get lost in my head there because as you're saying that, that just goes across all consumer everything. Because you think about how computer products, tech products are produced and manufactured overseas so that they cost less because they're paying less wages, so that they can bring in a lower class of people to be able to afford. Like these iPhones and stuff should be costing upwards of thousands of dollars if we were paying people fair wages and things like that. So it then is again blaming the class below for the actions of the class above them.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of misplaced, as I was looking up the when Megan Fox was in Ninja Turtles, I see the headline: Megan Fox returns to ruin another Ninja Turtles movie. Is one of the headlines I see. So,
wait, did she ruin it? Did she ruin? Well,
I guess so.
Well, we're blaming Megan Fox for ruining Ninja Turtles,
but ultimately, what we're saying is Ninja Turtles is still in the zeitgeist.
I feel like Megan and the Turtles are probably both doing just fine.
I think so.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we're still talking about them.
They have.
Well,
now at this point, because the Ninja Turtles started, you see, in the 80s, right? So at this point, they have generational wealth. There's been several generations of the Ninja Turtles to have that, so that's why they're gonna be all right. But the question is Uncle Phil right then to be harping on folks and telling them, and to a degree, fear mongering with his kids, with his nephew, all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I want to go back, Diedrich, to what you've said several times that I think is really important to internalize is the personal finance advice is designed for people with higher incomes, but we place it on people who have lower incomes. So when you hear the rule of thumb, for instance, that you have to have 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses to have a true emergency fund, right? That's immediately discouraging for people. And so I feel like that even thinking about what the milestones need to be, because then you have the Uncle Phil saying, what you're doing is inadequate and it's always going to be inadequate. And so I can always kind of yell at you about being inadequate. And maybe that's coming from a place of worry and fear, but that means it's going to be so much harder to get to that bar. And the gap between where you are now and getting to this personal finance rule of thumb is so huge that it might feel like you never get there.
Wow. Okay. So it's one of those things where if we're looking at it, it's kind of like a bell curve, right? where there are some folks on the ends that are the ones that we see more, that are the ones that get the TV shows. These are the Uncle Phils. These are the Family Matters families who did manage to eke their way out through hook and crook and probably a little bit of luck and help from other folks. But that's the ones that we look at when the big bell in the middle is all the folks who failed and all the folks who were unable to keep up with these ideals.
Yeah, and they failed by what standards, right? Like elite rich people and white supremacy standards.
And that's how I want to bring it all the way back to like the 90s Ninja Turtle movie. That's how they got the street kids, because like the Foot Clan in the movie, one I'm talking about, the 90s one, really old. They were a bunch of kids who were poor and disaffected, and they had no jobs and nothing to do. And they just like scooped them up off the streets and said, hey, come and hang out in this arcade and we'll give you something to do. We'll give you a job. We'll give you a purpose.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, and going back to the Will Smith, what's the show called? Will Smith, Fresh Prince, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Fresh Prince, yeah.
I mean, you know, like, I mean, that's interesting if you think about it, that it might make more sense to be really talking to the Fresh Prince or Will Smith, whatever his name was in the thing, because he's now been moved into a place of wealth. He has plenty of assets. He has plenty of opportunity. So now really is a time more for that your personal decisions really will greatly influence your ability to utilize these resources. It's very different than his mother, who was, you know, still in Philly, working hard, and it's just kind of working to survive. And it's kind of almost assumed that's all that can happen for her. But now, when you've been given a whole bunch of resources and opportunity, now is the space where like decisions can have a much bigger impact on your ability to utilize the wealth you've been given. He didn't earn it. He was just given it. And I think, and as were all the other kids of Uncle, whatever his name was, and Uncle Phil, that's right. And what was the mother? There were two actresses.
Well, what I was about to say is, you know, Will had, he got to see the consequences of not following the rules, because if you don't follow the rules, like Aunt Viv, you will be replaced with a biracial.
All right. So,
and that's the end of that chapter.
They will lighten you up.
Maybe next show we can talk about, what was that show that lasted like 6 weeks? Mixist or something like that? That was
did that not last? I saw yeah. Well, also remember, to bring it around to all of my stuff, remember that James Avery is the last Black person to play Shredder. I have to check IMDb. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm pretty sure.
We'll fact check
last
this later.
And maybe only. I would
and only, yeah.
Last, first, only.
Last.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, y'all. Well, this was a lot.
We've done all
the way around.
All the way out to Bel Air, all the way down to the sewers of New York City.
Diedrich, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Just going back to kind of where we started, that, you know, there is a place for personal finance, but that doesn't explain the kind of mass inequalities we have in our country. And I think the challenge is, how can we develop a personal finance that actually addresses the inequalities helps to address? Because personal finance by itself doesn't address it. We need policy and investments and resources to help address it. Or to more fully address it. But there is a place for us to think through, all right, with the resources we have, how can we best utilize that to maybe make myself more economically stable? Because like, we're not going to become rich and famous through personal finance, but maybe you can become a little bit more stable. And actually, you know, one thing about people talk about intergenerational wealth, we usually don't get into reality that it does take generations, right? Like, I know many people, like, their parents were able to provide a somewhat safe house in a lower income neighborhood, maybe went out with some things, but then that allowed their kids to go to college and become struggling middle income, right? And then maybe the next generation might become less struggling middle income if everything goes right. And usually things go wrong, and there's more ups and downs than that. But recognizing this really is a long-term thing, personal finance, you know, can be something to help you get through a, deal with these long-term issues, but it's not going to solve it by itself.
I think that really makes a lot of sense for those of you who are feeling daunted by this whole thing of, yeah, we do need policy. We do need bigger things systemically than me to make these happen. We can still remember that saving for me is saving for us because I'm a part of us, and that's inextricable. Thank you, Diedrich.
Thank you, Diedrich.
Doctor, will he be all right?
He'll pull through. What about his face? That's a different matter.
Check it, hey yo. I see the look on your face and the screen save me. Let me guess, relationship manifested, went fugazi. Listen to you talk, I tend to think you crazy. Being with you was like taking a crash course in public safety. Why does everything hinge upon your status as a soulmate? Continuous revolving door, but yet you so great. It's substitute with no shame, and swear to God it's no hate. Blasphemous with every single word, but speak with no mistakes. I peep the infallible nature, expose yourself so much that most have to degrade you. Like your conversation language, what is deep about you? They call it freedom when they be without you. That's liberation from the stress. You narcissistic with a complex. Listen, the world don't revolve around you, bringing nothing to the table like missing kittens. They found you empty, palm and desolate. Mind stayed on pessimist with every expectation on your tongue. We not accepting it. Bunch of brothers made you, took you out your darkness, gave you a new lease on life with eventual progress. Talk about saving, could have stored your whole existence in the cloud. These the type of thoughts I tend to reminisce when I get down. If you looking for some help, don't come around. I don't wear a cape, no S up on the chest. This is real human flesh, thoughts, emotions. I stays away from pain and hardship. Remove the feelings from my sleeve, it won't remain a target. Drive a hard bargain without a license. Won't get involved, it's not a crisis. Supersede drama and go achieve enlightenment. See it on your face and believe what I see is frightening. Hey yo, word?
I'm more worried about the mental scars.